You thought I could miss two recap days in a row? Well, I'm here, I'm back, and I'm here to give you your recaps of all games from yesterday's action. Let's go. The first game I'm going to discuss is the Sacramento Kings taking on the New Orleans Pelicans, where Sacramento Kings went on an offensive barrage, scoring 140 points and winning 140-125. Career high performance for Bogdan Bogdanovic, 35 points. De'Aaron Fox chipped in a very respectable 30 points and 10 assists. Harrison Barnes himself got 22 points. Now the Pelicans side of things, Zion went 10 for 12, 24 points. Ingram had 24 points himself. And also Drew Holiday chipped in with 17, 5, and 5. This game was just no defense whatsoever, and this game unfortunately dropped the Pelicans to the 13th position because they just cannot play defense. I mean, when you have like Bogdan Bogdanovic hitting three after three after three, and they just did nothing to stop it. He had 6 threes that game, and it just led to like a lot of just like their offense just flowing and getting into rhythm, and they just could not stop from there. I mean, like, if you just look at their entire roster, like, Harrison Barnes shot over 50%, Bielitsa, who scored 11, scored over 50%, Fox scoring 30 points over 50%. Like, it was just, like, a horrible, like, defensive showing, and these are the type of games that you have to win. The Kings are not part of this playoff contention crew, and you're not able to pull out the victory. You allowed them to score 54% from the field. I mean, you score 57% yourself, but when you have them, out rebounding you, and just like taking care of the ball, you just cannot make the playoffs under those circumstances. And they weren't able to do that, and that just like puts them even further away from that 8th position. So, bad loss for the Pelicans. Good performance by Bogdan. We move on to the next game, and we have the Bucks winning 130-116 over the Miami Heat. Giannis and Middleton both had 33 apiece. And on the Heat side of things, you had good performances from Duncan Robinson, who had 21 points, 20 points for Tyler Hero coming off the bench. Now, this game was interesting because although it was 130-116 Bucks, the game was close for the first, 42 minutes. And that was because the Heat came on swinging. I mean, they went up to a 23-point lead in the second quarter at one point, and it took a miraculous effort by the Bucks to even get it down to 14 at halftime. And from there, it was a really back and forth battle. Even when the Bucks started coming back in the late in the third, early in the fourth, Miami had their answers. But like from the 6-minute point onwards, the Bucks were just absolutely dominant. No one could stop Giannis, and the Heat could not buy a bucket. And you could tell the difference in their team when they don't have a Jimmy Butler or Goran Dragic type player to kind of calm down the offense at the end of the game. And you have someone like the Milwaukee Bucks who are super talented. Chris Middleton could get any bucket he wanted. Same thing with Giannis, and they were able to take advantage that way. I mean, it came late. It definitely came late, but the Milwaukee Bucks were able to take the win there. Still some great times for the Miami Heat, but it was a tough loss to take there. The Bucks officially clinched the number 1 seed in the East. We move on to the next game, and this is a very highly anticipated game because it was a battle of the 2 undefeated teams between the Phoenix Suns and Indiana Pacers. But the Phoenix Suns were able to bring out the victory, 114-99. Great performance from DeAndre Ayton, scoring 23 points and 10 rebounds. Devin Booker, 20 points, 10 assists. And on the Pacers side of things, great performance from Michael Brogdon, 25, 6, and 6. Sadly, TJ Warren is human, scoring only 16 points, 11 rebounds on 20 shots. Not the greatest game, but the Suns stay undefeated, and the Indiana Pacers take their first loss. It was a very interesting game because the Pacers were in it for most of the game, and then kind of like the game before this, the Milwaukee game, it took the fourth quarter for the Phoenix Suns to really show up and like break this game wide open, which they ended up doing, and they were able to get the win. I mean, sadly, TJ Warren can get revenge on his former team, who they traded for cash considerations, but the Phoenix Suns, they're still undefeated. We don't know how long will this continue. We don't know, but cash considerations is undefeated in the bubble right now, and the Phoenix Suns are looking really good. If they're able to make this playoff, it's going to be one of the better stories coming from the NBA over the last few years. We move on to the next game, and we have the Dallas Mavericks versus the LA Clippers, where the Clippers won 126-111 behind Kawhi Leonard's 29-point performance. Ivica Zubac was the was a talking point for the Clippers, scoring 21 points, 10 for 10 from the field, perfect, and grabbing 15 rebounds. On the Dallas side of things, you had Luka Doncic scoring 29 points and Kristaps with 30. And the interesting part of this game is that the Mavericks and Clippers were going at it throughout the entire game. Clippers had their had the larger lead, but the Mavs were always seemed to come back. And in the fourth quarter, Kristaps was absolutely on fire. So when they stopped going to him late in that fourth quarter, it was very puzzling that Rick Carl went away from Kristaps, who was the one that actually got them back in the game. And watching the game, I was just kind of wondering if they're too overly rely on Luka, because Kristaps had it going and they weren't just able to ride the hot hand, and the Clippers were able to take advantage of that, because when you have Luka being guarded by Kawhi and Paul George, although Luka had a pretty good game, it was going to be tough nonetheless. And Kristaps was completely dominating. I don't know why they didn't go back to him constantly, but I guess that was to their downfall. Another loss for the Mavericks, another good win for the Clippers, who we'll talk about later, but they kind of extend their lead over the third seed. We move on to the next game, and we have the Portland TrailBlazers winning 125-115 over the Denver Nuggets. On the Portland side of things, 11 three-pointer hits from Damian Lillard, 45 points in that game, 12 assists. It was the Damian Lillard-Gary Trent show, basically. They combined for 18 threes, and Gary Trent himself had 7 of those. And it was just an offensive barrage by those two, which led to the loss of the Denver Nuggets. Now, on the Denver Nuggets side of things, another breakout performance from Michael Porter Jr. My prediction is looking really good. And 27 points this game, 12 rebounds, 10 for 18 shooting. Jeremy Grant himself had 18 points in that game, which is really good. And it was a decent all-around effort. I mean, Bobo also got some minutes as well. And the thing about this game was that, the Denver Nuggets didn't really get to play Jokic in the fourth quarter. They kind of took MPJ out early, but they looked good. And sadly, they weren't able to, because if they won this, they would have been 0.5 behind the Clippers. But sadly, they weren't able to do that. And the TrailBlazers only half a game behind the Grizzlies. And Damian Lillard was awesome this game, along with Gary Trent. Fantastic shooting all around. They scored 23 threes on 59% shooting. That's just absolutely ridiculous. And they were able to pull out the win, which is a very impressive feat. They're still looking to ask for blood to get that 8 seed, and they're going to be very, very dangerous for anyone to go up against at any point in the playoffs. So good one for the TrailBlazers. Still some good things to look at the Nuggets. And then we have the final game, the Houston Rockets winning 113-97 over the Los Angeles Lakers without LeBron, but at the same time, it was the Houston Rockets without Russell Westbrook. James Harden went off for 39 points and 12 assists, while on the Lakers side of things, they had a good performance from Kyle Kuzma, 21, 5 and 3, and then the 80 who was leading the Lakers that day only had 17 points, 12 rebounds. You could tell that the Lakers were kind of still coasting at this point, but I'm gonna talk about them more in my podcast later on today. But there's a lot of question marks I have with this team, even though they lost the number 1 seed. And this was basically the case of, we've seen what an Anthony Davis-led team does, and we know what a James Harden-led team does. We know which was more successful, and that has clearly been the James Harden one. And he went absolutely off on the Los Angeles Lakers, and in the second half, they just absolutely busted this game wide open. And the threes were definitely in their favor. The Lakers only hitting 2 threes compared to the Rockets 21. They're going to win that battle 99.9% of the time. And the Rockets, they're looking really good. Only lost 1 game in the bubble so far. They're looking to climb up those standings. Same record as the Oklahoma City Thunder as well. So that's going to be a very interesting race, especially because they're both half a game behind the Jazz. Thank you for listening to this recap. I'm going to be posting another podcast later. Remember to please like, share, subscribe if you're on YouTube. And if you're on Instagram, leave a follow and leave a like. So thank you guys for listening, and I'll talk to you guys on Sunday. Peace.